Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today. I want to show you how I painted these snowy trees. It's a pretty easy technique that I have no doubt you'll be able to do and enjoy. If you don't get it the first time, then try again. Supplies are listed below, so let's get started. I started by taping off my paper with artist tape. This is a 5 by 7 inch sheet of watercolor paper. I used Arches 100% cotton cold press paper. I'm wetting my paper with clean water. Make sure you don't have a puddle on your paper. It does not have to be perfectly covered with water. I skipped a few spots toward the foreground at the bottom part of the paper, leaving it dry to add to the overall texture varieties in the snow on the ground later. I mixed up a light blue with a little bit of a darker blue. You can use Payne's Gray or even indigo to make a very light mixture to paint the sky. This is a daytime sky, so you should keep it light. I like to paint my sky with swooping motions. Make sure you choose one direction for your swoops. This way of painting helps create subtle motion and movement in your sky. Keep the upper part of your sky a little bit darker and keep it lighter as you go further down towards the horizon line. I love textures in my painting, so I'm flicking in some clean water onto my sky. This will land on the wet paint and push some of the pigments around, leaving behind some small areas with no paint. You do not have to do this at all. It is not necessary. I just like to get messy and create textures. Now I'm using the same color mixtures to loosely paint the snowy ground. The most important thing to remember is to leave a good amount of white space when you paint the ground. White space is snow and the color is the shadows, so don't overthink this part. It's safer to paint less than to accidentally put down too much paint, thus losing your white space. Also, make sure this color is light, meaning it is diluted with water. We can always add more if it dries too light, but it would not look good and be harder to fix if you go in too dark initially. I'm also tapping in some of the same color here and there just to, again, add textures. You don't have to do that. If you create harsh lines, you can always blend it out with a clean, moist brush. We will need to let this layer dry about 90% dry. I don't want it to be 100% dry because I want the paper to still be a little bit moist when I put down the paint for the trees. This will help my trees to blend in with the sky a little bit, thus creating a softer tree line as opposed to a hard tree line if the paper were to be 100% dry before painting. I'm using a light blue and making a medium value mixture of this color. I'm painting in my trees at the horizon line. Vary the height of the trees. Make sure you put down enough color during this step because we will use salt next. The salt works best if you have enough pigments on your paper, something for the salt to react to. Leave enough room at the bottom of your tree canopies to paint in trunks in later. I'm using regular table salt for this step. Be liberal with your salt and put down quite a bit, but not layers of it, just one layer, and make sure that you cover most of the trees. I'm just using a clean, moist brush now to check my edges, making sure to gently blend out to make soft edges. This is not important, but it was the look I wanted. I have waited about 3 to 4 minutes since I painted the trees and sprinkled with the salt. The 3 to 4 minutes is adequate for the salt to start working and doing what it's supposed to do. The trees are still about 75% wet still, which is good. We don't want the trees to be completely dry. We're going to lift some of the colors out of the trees. I tore off a small piece of paper towel and dipped it in clean water, and I squeezed out the excess water. To lift, I simply dabbed my paper towel on the trees. Make sure you don't lift off all of the colors everywhere. Leave some colors in the trees. Move around to different areas of the trees too. The areas that you lift off colors will be the snow on the tree, and we will reinforce this later by painting in shadows. I recommend lifting along the top edge of the trees where the tree line meets the sky. This is where you should see most of the snow that has fallen onto the tree. I've mixed up black and brown for dark value to paint the tree trunks and branches. I've also switched over to using a smaller round brush for details. Paint in your trunks and branches. Depending on how your trees look, you may naturally see 2 or 3 or maybe even more trees in your painting. It's up to you and based on what looks best in your landscape right now. I think I can make out about 3 trees in mine. I started painting my trunks, but it started bleeding into the tree, so make sure your tree is dry completely before you paint in the trunks and the branches. So don't do what I just did. Now that my trees are completely dry, I'm rubbing off the salt. You don't want to start rubbing off the salt until you know that your painting is completely dry. This will really smear the colors all over the place and you will lose the effects and the textures. So make sure it's dry. Now I'm painting in my tree trunks and branches using a smaller round brush. Take your time with this step. It can take some time. Feel free to fast forward. But generally, look at your trees and paint your trunks where it makes sense for there to be a tree. And then look at your trees when you're painting your branches and try to paint the branches in the darker part of your trees where the shadows would be, avoiding some of the white parts because that is where the snow or accumulation of snow would be. All right, so our next step, we will mix up a slight darker value of the blue that we used in the trees. Just a mixture of the light blue, the dark blue, and a very tiny bit of the black and brown. And I'm going into my trees looking for little areas of shadows underneath white chunks of snow and placing my dark color there. And this will really help bring out the snow on the trees. When you drop in these colors, when you drop in the darker value, use your brush to kind of blend it out as well so that we're not leaving harsh lines. Your tree might look very different from mine, which is absolutely normal and expected. So look at your trees and see where the shadows are, where the snow, clumps of snow are, and go with that. When you're happy with the shadows in the tree, we're going to paint a shadow under the tree. We have to ground the trees so that it looks like it's part of the ground that it's on. I simply use a very light value of the same mixture and put it underneath the trunk and kind of blend it out. We don't want a harsh shadow. We want to put down the color and clean our brush and blend out the edges. I'm using the same mixture to paint in shadows on the ground in general. Remember, this is snow, so do not cover up all of the white. This is kind of a random process. You don't want to overdo it. Make sure your mixture is a light color, a light value of this color. And look at your painting and see where a shadow would make sense. Now I'm just reinforcing the shadow under the trunk. And I think we're almost done, guys. After drawing my painting, we're really into the details part of the painting. Look at your painting and see what else is needed, what other details you'd like to add. So I'm just fixing up some of the branches here. You may not need to do this step. And then lastly, I have some white gouache. You can also use Dr.ph Martin bleedproof white. Sorry, I forgot the name of it for a second. I'm just splattering in white here and there. This did not show it very well, obviously. So what I'm going to do is use this white gouache. Make sure that it is opaque, and I'm going to add snow onto the tree. You'll see that I'll add the snow in the form of flickering it at first. But then I decided that it wasn't really showing up. So I'm dabbing in the white gouache to different areas of the tree just to really enhance some of the white areas on the tree. The white flickers of the white gouache really did show up actually, but it's very small and fine, better appreciated in real life when you're looking at the painting, so you may not even see any of it on camera, but it's there. Because we painted with a lot of water on the ground, the painting or the paint dried really light. That is expected, so you can just go in and paint another layer if that is needed in your painting. And lastly, we're going to use our dark color and paint some birds in the sky if you would like to do that. The birds, I would keep them very small, and they're really just kind of various V shapes in the sky. You don't have to paint the birds if you don't want to, and otherwise you can call it done. And now it's time for the reveal, which is my favorite part. I hope you painted with me today, and please leave me a comment if you have any questions, if you've learned something new, if you have any other ideas for me. But I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.